The police officer's footsteps echoed through the hushed gallery. Every paintbrush stopped mid-stroke. 63 pairs of eyes watched as they approached my workstation, where I was hunched over a 16th century canvas, magnifying glass in hand. "Ma'am, there's been a serious allegation," the taller officer announced, his voice carrying through the cavernous restoration studio. I carefully set down my tools, aware that my trembling hands might betray my shock. My supervisor materialized beside them, her smile tight with satisfaction. "Should have resigned when I asked," she whispered, just loudly enough for me to hear. The charges were stunning, deliberately destroying priceless artwork under the guise of restoration. My colleagues' expressions ranged from shock to vindication as I was escorted out. Nobody spoke in my defense. Nobody questioned why the most meticulous conservator in the department would suddenly start ruining paintings. I went quietly, head high, though my insides felt hollow. They'd orchestrated this perfectly, timing it when I returned from my grandfather's funeral, ensuring maximum audience, calculating the precise moment to crush 15 years of reputation building in less than 15 seconds. Before I continue this story, if you appreciate art world intrigue and calculated revenge, take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more stories that peel back the polished veneer of professional worlds. Your comments fuel these narratives, so let me know what you think about what's unfolding. My name is Petra. At 42, I've spent most of my adult life bringing dead artists back to life, rescuing their works from time's cruel hands. My colleagues call me the surgeon because of my precision. Art historians across 3 continents send their most desperate cases to me. Beneath my quiet exterior lies an obsessive attention to detail that borders on the pathological. I can identify pigment compositions by smell. I can feel canvas age through latex gloves. These qualities made me valuable until they made me dangerous. 4 hours of questioning revealed the accusation's absurdity. The damaged painting had been processed while I was 3 states away, burying my grandfather, a fact easily verified by flight records, hotel receipts, and funeral home documentation. The officers released me with murmured apologies. "These things happen," one said awkwardly. "Professional jealousy makes people do strange things." I nodded, silent, already calculating my next moves. 3 days later, I returned to the gallery. Surprisingly, my security clearance still worked. The receptionist avoided my eyes. My colleagues busied themselves with sudden tasks as I walked to my station. The message was clear. I wasn't welcome, but they hadn't expected me to return at all. My workstation had been searched, thoroughly, every drawer slightly misaligned, my reference books rearranged, the hidden compartment in my desk unlocked. They'd been looking for something specific. They hadn't found it. To understand why, you need to know what started this ordeal. 6 months earlier, my supervisor Olympia had arrived with her inner circle, 3 restorers, who moved as a unit, sharing secrets in hushed tones, bringing miraculous discoveries to our gallery. With suspicious frequency, their latest triumph hung in the main exhibition hall, a supposedly long-lost masterpiece they'd rescued from an anonymous private collection. The gallery director was ecstatic. Donors opened checkbooks. Critics praised our institution's rising prominence. But something bothered me about these discoveries. Under my specialized light array, the microscopic brush patterns showed inconsistencies, not obvious enough to trigger standard authentication protocols, but visible to someone who had studied Renaissance techniques for decades. "What concerns you exactly?" Olympia had asked when I requested a private meeting, her voice honey-sweet while her eyes remained glacial. "The tertiary stroke patterns don't match documented techniques from this period," I explained, showing her my findings. "And the pigment aging appears accelerated in certain sections. Sounds like someone's jealous of our innovative techniques," she said, smile never wavering. "Perhaps restoration isn't evolving quickly enough for your traditional methods." After that conversation, everything shifted. Supplies I needed disappeared. Work assignments dwindled. Colleagues who once sought my advice now hurried past. Small sabotages accumulated. Mixed solutions, contaminated brushes, missing notes. The pressure to resign mounted. For artistic differences, they suggested, to pursue other opportunities. When I refused, the incidents escalated. What they didn't realize, I had been creating microscopic signature pigment mixes in the corner of every canvas I touched for years. Not written analysis that could vanish. Not photographs that could be manipulated. Instead, I developed unique color combinations visible only under specific light wavelengths, a chemical signature only I could interpret, my personal restoration fingerprint. I began examining their miraculous discoveries during after-hours shifts. The truth emerged slowly, like a painting revealed beneath centuries of grime. Their discovered masterpieces were partial forgeries, damaged authentic pieces extensively overpainted with artificially aged materials to appear pristine. Their motivation was transparent. Our gallery's international standing depended on major acquisitions. Authentic, pristine masterpieces rarely emerge, but damaged ones can be acquired quietly, restored beyond recognition, and unveiled to acclaim. The night before they called the police, I caught Olympia watching me test one of her team's restorations under my specialized light. She said nothing, simply smiled, and walked away. The next morning, officers arrived. During my forced absence, they searched my workspace but found nothing unusual. What they missed? I had already shared my specialized light tools and preliminary findings with an art authentication expert at the National Museum, someone outside Olympia's sphere of influence. I spent those 3 days building my case, not in reports they could lose, but through carefully orchestrated demonstrations for select trustees. I included something unexpected: auction house visits by Olympia, coinciding with mysterious acquisitions of damaged paintings from private collections. A week after my return, Olympia approached my workstation. The studio fell silent as she loomed over me. "I'm surprised you came back," she said, voice pitched to Carrie. "Most people would understand when they're no longer compatible with an institution." I continued working, adjusting my microscope. "I've always been stubborn about finishing what I start." "And what exactly are you finishing, Petra?" Her voice hardened. I finally looked up. "Just ensuring every artwork receives proper authentication. It's our responsibility to history, isn't it?" Something flickered behind her eyes, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her: fear. That afternoon, my security clearance was revoked. When I arrived the next morning, my badge didn't work. Security called Olympia, who emerged from the staff entrance with theatrical concern. "Oh, Petra, didn't you get my email? The board decided to place you on administrative leave pending a review of your restoration practices. Recent incidents have raised concerns about your methodology." Several colleagues watched from the doorway, expressions carefully neutral. Among them stood Darren, once my friend, now Olympia's most devoted follower. "What incidents?" I asked, knowing the answer wouldn't matter. "Multiple works showing degradation after your treatments. Very concerning patterns." She handed me an envelope. "All explained here, along with severance options, should you choose the dignified path." I took the envelope without opening it. "And if I contest these findings?" Her smile tightened. "I wouldn't recommend it. Art restoration is a small community. Word travels quickly about difficult personalities." The security guard shifted uncomfortably beside us. Several tourists had stopped to watch the confrontation, sensing drama. I nodded once and turned to leave, feeling their collective relief at my apparent surrender. They believed I was finished, my reputation damaged beyond repair. What they didn't understand: I never fought battles I hadn't already won. That evening, my phone rang, the gallery director requesting an urgent meeting at his home. Olympia had overplayed her hand. The authentication expert I'd contacted had begun asking uncomfortable questions. Now the director wanted answers directly from me, away from institutional ears. I arrived carrying a small case containing portable versions of my specialized lights. For 3 hours, I methodically demonstrated how Olympia's team had been acquiring damaged, authentic pieces and extensively overpainting them. I showed him my documentation of auction purchases, the inconsistent pigment patterns, and finally, my own signature restoration marks that proved which sections of each painting were original and which were modern creations. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" he asked, face ashen. "Would you have believed me over her? She brought prestige, donors, and media attention. I just fix broken things." He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "There's something else," I said, showing him the financial tracking I'd compiled. The authentication paperwork for each discovery was processed through different channels, but they all connect to a single offshore account. His hands trembled as he reviewed the documents. "How did you find this? You left me alone for 3 days with nothing but rage and determination. I've spent 15 years developing patience. They spent 6 months creating enemies." The gallery opened as usual the next morning. I wasn't there, but according to my sources, Olympia was jubilant, telling everyone I'd finally seen reason and would be quietly departing. She personally began clearing my workspace, claiming my tools for redistribution. She didn't notice when two unfamiliar visitors arrived, quietly speaking with security. She didn't see them examining her team's most celebrated restoration. She was too busy dividing my professional life among her followers. The commotion began at exactly 10:17 a.m. The gallery doors swung open as 4 police officers entered, this time accompanied by a woman in a tailored suit who carried herself with unmistakable authority. Whispers rippled across the restoration studio. Olympia straightened, her expression shifting from confusion to practiced concern as they approached. Her inner circle, Darren, Nina, and Vance, exchanged glances, their hands growing still over the canvases they'd been working on. "Can I help you?" Olympia asked, stepping forward with the confident smile that had charmed donors and directors alike. The woman in the suit produced credentials. "Agent Moraine, Art Crimes Division. We have warrants to search these premises and to question several individuals regarding international trafficking of cultural artifacts and art forgery." The studio fell silent. Olympia's smile remained fixed, but her complexion paled. "There must be some mistake. We're a respected institution." "Miss Olympia Riker?" one officer interrupted. "We'll need you to come with us." "You as well," he added, gesturing to Darren, Nina, and Vance. Darren stepped forward, indignation radiating from his tall frame. "This is ridiculous. Whatever Petra told you." "Sir, please step back," the officer said firmly. "I learned about this scene later, described to me by Irene from Textile Preservation, who recorded parts of it on her phone. She said the most telling moment wasn't when they read the charges, but when the officers began carefully removing Olympia's most celebrated restoration from the wall. That's when Olympia's composure finally shattered. "You need special handling protocols for that piece," she shouted. "You can't just, it's worth millions. The provenance documentation is in my office." Agent Moraine smiled thinly. "We're particularly interested in that documentation, Miss Riker." As Olympia and her team were escorted out, the gallery director emerged from his office, addressing the stunned staff. "Work will continue as normal. Please direct any inquiries to administrative staff. A press statement will be released this afternoon." His eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on my empty workstation. I wasn't there to witness any of this. Instead, I sat in a small conference room at the National Museum across town, surrounded by authentication experts and law enforcement officials who had been building their case for weeks. My evidence had been the final piece they needed. "They never considered you might fight back," Agent Moraine told me when she returned. "According to your director, they were convinced you'd slink away to protect what remained of your reputation." "People often mistake precision for passivity," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. The charges against Olympia and her team were extensive. They hadn't just created partial forgeries. They'd established an elaborate network for acquiring damaged authentic works through private sales, restoring them beyond recognition, then selling them to galleries and private collectors worldwide. Our gallery's reputation had simply been their most prestigious launchpad. For 16 days, I existed in a strange limbo. Officially still on administrative leave, I spent my days giving statements, examining suspect artworks, and demonstrating my authentication techniques to increasingly impressed investigators. Each night, I returned to my empty apartment, wondering if 15 years of career building could survive this earthquake. On the 17th day, my phone rang. The gallery director requested my presence at an emergency board meeting. His voice sounded strange, tight, with an emotion I couldn't identify. "Am I still employed?" I asked. A pause. "Just be there at 4. I arrived precisely on time, dressed in my most professional attire, a subtle armor against whatever awaited me. The receptionist, who had ignored me just weeks before, now smiled nervously as she escorted me not to the usual meeting room, but to the chairman's private office. The entire board sat around the antique table, their expressions ranging from embarrassment to calculation. The director stood as I entered. "Thank you for coming, Petra," he said, gesturing to an empty chair. "We have a situation that requires your unique perspective." For 90 minutes, they outlined the damage assessment. Olympia's scheme had touched nearly 30 artworks in our collection. The press was circling. Donors were panicking. The gallery's reputation teetered on collapse. "We need someone with unquestionable integrity to lead our restoration department through this crisis," the chairman finally said. "Someone whose authentication methods are beyond reproach." I sat perfectly still, feeling the weight of 15 years of meticulous work, of thousands of hours bent over canvases, of countless nights studying techniques long-dead artists had never documented. "You want me to clean up their mess," I stated. The director winced. "We want to offer you the position of interim gallery director, with full authority to restructure the restoration department as you see fit." The offer hung between us. It was everything I would have wanted before this nightmare began. Now, it felt like payment for suffering. "I have conditions," I said. They leaned forward, eager to appear accommodating. "My authentication methodology becomes the gallery standard. I select my own team, and the board agrees to an external ethics review of acquisition practices." The chairman frowned. "That last point isn't necessary. Olympia's actions weren't. They happened under this board's supervision," I interrupted. "Either we demonstrate transparency or I decline." After tense negotiation, they agreed. As I left the meeting, the director caught up with me in the hallway. "You could have asked for anything, more money, a permanent appointment," he said, studying me. "Why focus on process changes?" I looked at him steadily. "Because money and titles don't protect integrity. Only systems do that." The next morning, I used my newly reinstated security clearance to enter the gallery before opening hours. The restoration studio stood empty and silent. Yellow evidence tags marked spaces where artworks had been removed. Olympia's desk had been cleared, her personal items boxed and labeled. I walked to my workstation, untouched since the day of her arrest. A fine layer of dust covered my tools. I ran my finger across my desk, leaving a clean line in the gray film, a perfect metaphor for what happened when someone finally wiped away obscuring layers. That afternoon, I sat behind the director's desk as the gallery staff assembled for an announcement. Faces registered shock, resentment, and in a few cases, genuine relief at seeing me in a position of authority. "The transition will be challenging," I told them. "Every piece Olympia's team touched must be re-examined. Our authentication protocols are changing. Some of you may find these changes uncomfortable." I paused, making eye contact with those who had turned away when the police led me out. "Everyone here has a choice to make. Adapt to new standards of integrity, or find positions elsewhere. I'll be conducting individual meetings starting tomorrow." The press conference the following day was an exercise in controlled demolition. Rather than hide the scandal, we outlined exactly what had happened and the steps being taken to rectify it. I demonstrated my authentication techniques for the cameras, showing how specialized light revealed the truth beneath the surface. "This isn't just about forgery," I explained to the journalists. "It's about respecting artistic legacy. These painters committed their lives to creating beauty that would outlast them. We owe them our honesty." The coverage was extensive but ultimately favorable. "Gallery takes bold transparency stance after forgery scandal," read one headline. Another proclaimed, "Authentication revolutionary rebuilds gallery's reputation." Within a week, 3 staff members resigned rather than adapt to the new protocols. Others embraced the changes, some with surprising enthusiasm. Whispered conversations stopped when I entered rooms, but not from fear, from a newfound respect for someone who had refused to be erased. 4 weeks after the arrests, I visited the detention center where Olympia awaited trial. The guard led me to a sterile visitation room, where she sat waiting, her usual elegant appearance diminished by standard-issue clothing and the absence of makeup. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Come to gloat?" she asked, trying to sound dismissive though her voice wavered. I sat across from her. "No, I came to understand." "Understand what?" "Why you chose me as your target. You could have manipulated the director directly. Instead, you tried to destroy me first. Why?" She studied me, calculation visible even now. "Because you were the only one who could actually see what we were doing. The others might know restoration, but you see through things. It's unnerving." I nodded. "It would have been simpler to respect the art. Simpler, but not nearly as profitable," she replied with a ghost of her former smile. "Some of us need more than the satisfaction of invisible work. Nothing about restoration is invisible to those who understand its value." Her smile faded. Easy philosophy from someone sitting on my side of power now. I leaned forward. "You misunderstood what happened, Olympia. You thought you were teaching me about power. Instead, you taught me how to completely dismantle someone's reputation." Color drained from her face. "What does that mean?" "It means I've requested authentication reviews of every piece you've ever handled, not just at our gallery, but throughout your entire career. Your artistic legacy is being methodically examined, canvas by canvas, brushstroke by brushstroke." She sat perfectly still, the implications washing over her. Her voice, when it finally came, was barely audible. Why go that far? You've already won. I stood to leave. Because you didn't just attack me, you attacked art itself. The dead can't defend their work. Someone has to do it for them. The following week brought an unexpected visitor to my office, Darren, released on bail while awaiting trial. Security escorted him in, remaining by the door as he stood awkwardly before my desk. Gone was the confident artist who had once been my colleague, then my adversary. They said I needed permission to collect some personal research materials, he explained, eyes darting around the transformed space that had once been the director's domain. I studied him, the rumpled clothes, the sleepless eyes, the nervous hands. Sit down, Darren, he complied, perching on the edge of the chair like someone prepared to flee. I didn't know how far it went, he blurted out. The authentication falsification, yes, but not the international trafficking, not the stolen pieces. Yet you helped destroy my reputation, I replied calmly. You switched my solutions, contaminated my samples, reported false concerns about my work quality. He paled. How did you— Security cameras in the supply room. I requisitioned the footage after the third accident. I needed to understand who was targeting me. Olympia said you were threatening the gallery's Renaissance program, he said, voice hollow. That your jealousy would damage all our careers if you weren't removed. And that justified framing me for damaging priceless artwork? His gaze dropped to his hands. I've lost everything. My position, my reputation. My partner left when the charges were announced. I leaned back in my chair, letting silence fill the space between us. He'd come expecting either forgiveness or condemnation. I offered neither. Your research notebooks are in storage room B, shelf 3. Security will escort you. Don't remove anything else. He stood, hesitating. What happens now? To you? That depends on prosecutors and how cooperative you become. To your work? Every piece you've touched is being re-authenticated using my protocols. And when they find inconsistencies, then the truth will be documented, as it always should have been. After he left, I opened my desk drawer and removed a small black notebook. Inside were 15 years of observations, not just about paintings, but about people, their motivations, their insecurities, their patterns. I'd recorded Darren's gradual shift from colleague to saboteur, noting the day his loyalty transferred to Olympia, cataloging each betrayal with the same precision I applied to canvas analysis. The notebook contained similar entries about every staff member, including those who now smiled at me in hallways. I trusted none of them completely. This wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition. The art world's surface appeared refined, but underneath lay currents of ambition, jealousy, and calculated alliances that shifted like quicksand. 2 months after taking the interim director position, I received a call from Agent Moraine. Thought you'd want to know. Olympia's taken a plea deal. She's providing information about the entire network. What prompted her cooperation? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Apparently, the Museum of Modern Art just announced they're reviewing a major acquisition she authenticated 5 years ago. Something about pigment irregularities detected using a new scanning technique. I smiled to myself. Interesting timing. Remarkably so, Moraine replied, a knowing tone in her voice, almost as if someone had been methodically contacting major institutions with a new authentication protocol. That evening, I visited the gallery's main exhibition hall after closing hours. The walls had been rearranged, featuring properly authenticated works with transparent documentation about restoration processes. In the center stood a new installation, a partially restored 16th century Madonna, its condition report honestly noting which sections remained original and which had been sensitively preserved. Beside it hung a detailed explanation of our new authentication process, complete with images showing how specialized light revealed layers of history within the paint. Visitors could even use a specially designed app to view the painting under different light wavelengths on their phones, experiencing the detection process themselves. This had been my true revenge, not just exposing Olympia and her team, but transforming how restoration itself was presented to the public. No more magical discoveries appearing fully pristine. Instead, honest acknowledgement of art's journey through time and the visible human hands that had touched it along the way. The board had resisted initially, arguing that exposing restoration processes would diminish the painting's mystique. I had countered that transparency would actually deepen public appreciation. Early visitor numbers proved me right. Attendance had increased 30% since implementing the new approach. 3 months into my tenure as interim director, the board made my appointment permanent. That same week, the national press ran a feature story about our transparency initiative. The morning after publication, I arrived to find a small package on my desk. Inside was a museum catalog from a small European institution, open to a page featuring a portrait attributed to an obscure 17th century artist. A yellow sticky note marked the entry. Pigment analysis would be interesting here. Agent Moraine was feeding me leads now, pointing toward other institutions, where Olympia's network might have placed questionable works. Our alliance had become mutually beneficial. She gained expert analysis, while I extended the reach of my authentication methods beyond our gallery walls. The final hearing in Olympia's case took place 6 months after her arrest. I attended, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom as the judge delivered her sentence. 8 years for art fraud, with additional charges pending for international trafficking. As officers led her away, her gaze found mine across the crowded room. I expected hatred, perhaps a final flash of defiance. Instead, I saw something unexpected, resignation mixed with a reluctant respect. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, acknowledging a superior opponent. I didn't return the gesture. Her acknowledgement meant nothing to me. This had never been a personal contest, despite how she'd framed it. This was about something larger, the integrity of art history itself. Walking back to the gallery afterward, I passed a small restoration studio where a young woman worked intently on a damaged canvas. Through the window, I watched her careful movements, the focused precision, the reverence for what lay beneath her brush. She didn't know she was being observed, yet her technique remained flawless. I found myself smiling. This was what mattered, this quiet dedication that would never make headlines or attract wealthy donors. The true work happened in these moments of concentration when the restorer disappeared into the task, becoming merely the conduit through which artistic legacy continued its journey through time. The next morning, I received an email from an international conservation conference, requesting I deliver the keynote address on my authentication methods. They wanted me to train others in the techniques that had exposed one of the art world's most sophisticated forgery networks. This was the ultimate victory, not the dismantling of Olympia's career, but the elevation of authentication standards across the entire field. My methods would become the new baseline, making similar schemes nearly impossible to execute. What Olympia never understood about me, I didn't care about personal recognition. I cared about the integrity of the process. She'd wanted me erased from the gallery's history. Instead, I had become indelible. My restoration techniques, now taught to students who would never learn her name. As I prepared my presentation for the conference, I opened with a simple truth. Authentication isn't about catching criminals. It's about honoring artistic intention across centuries. The artist's hand should remain visible even through restoration, because without that authenticity, we're no longer preserving history. We're replacing it with our own illusion. The day before the conference, I received a letter from Nina, one of Olympia's former team members, now serving a reduced sentence for her cooperation. "You were right about the pigments," she wrote. "We thought no one would ever look closely enough to notice the inconsistencies. Olympia convinced us that even if someone did, they'd stay quiet to protect the gallery's reputation. You were the variable we couldn't control, someone who cared more about artistic truth than institutional prestige." I folded the letter and placed it in my notebook, another data point in my ongoing study of human behavior. People are like paintings, I've found. Their surface presents one image, but under the right light, different layers reveal themselves. The question is whether you're willing to look deeply enough to see what lies beneath. If you've stayed with this story until now, you understand something essential about integrity, how it's tested, broken, and sometimes painstakingly restored. Like and subscribe if you value these explorations of professional worlds where reputation and truth collide. Share your thoughts in the comments about times when standing your ground cost you something significant but preserved something more valuable. Your stories create a mosaic more complex than any single narrative could capture. Like art itself, our collective experiences reveal patterns that help us understand the human condition in all its flawed, beautiful complexity.